I don't remember. This is a side note. I remember seeing on Twitter, I believe, so it's 100% legit. 100%. You got to believe everything you see on Twitter. But I think
Absolutely.
I saw... Yeah, 100%. But I think I saw...
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Meet, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode we're talking all about autonomous tractors of all things. And with us to talk about this episode, another member of our all-star crew is fan favorite Patrick of the Silly Monday Things podcast. Patrick, how are you doing?
Hi, how's it going? I'm doing great. I am totally a tractor expert and ready to go.
Welcome back on the show. It's been a while. It's always fun to hear your voice again.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it every day, but I mean, I'm coming with the jokes. I hope you're ready. I don't know. I'm out of practice. I haven't guessed it in a while. It's been a minute. I'm happy to get back on and talk with you.
It has been some time. I'm always happy to hear your jokes. They're always the best.
Totally. I am an expert dad joke teller. Just ask my kids. I keep them laughing all the time.
Awesome. So, real quick, just go ahead and remind everybody who you are, what you do. If you have anything else you'd like to plug, be sure to do that now.
All right. Well, my name is Patrick. I enjoy long walks on the beach, Marvel movies, technology. Yeah. So, no, seriously. So, my name is Patrick. I have now a couple of podcasts. I record Silly Mundane Things with my friend Becky. It's a little bit of everything and kind of on a little bit of a hiatus right now. The last episode is with none other than our very own Brendan Black here. So you guys might be interested to check it out. I started a new podcast, though. I'm talking a lot about tech with my friend AK. We talk about a lot of things. I've gone over the last couple of episodes, my adventures in upgrading to an iPhone, and it is more fun than you might think. A certain company has really made my life difficult there, but we did get it through. So a little teaser there if you wish to listen. Otherwise, I'm excited to talk about smart tractors here. It's kind of touches a special place in my heart because it's a lot. It reminds me a lot of this company. Reminds me a lot of the Tesla of tractors, and I'm really excited. I watched the video, wasn't sure what I was going to think about it, and I watched and I said, I've learned stuff, and this is really cool. So we're excited to talk with you guys about it.
Yeah, for sure. And like Patrick said, that this whole conversation goes back to tech and ag, and I mean it kind of works out perfectly. You get to plug your new tech podcast, and we're talking about new tech in the industry that I like talking about. So it's a win-win.
I don't know if I actually said the name of my other podcast. I'm really bad at doing this. It's called Ubiquitous Methods. Ubiquitous. It will be in the show notes, I hope, because my spelling. Yeah, it's
Definitely.
I was concerned about spelling on that one. They're like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. But Ubiquitous Methods. I like the name. Hard to spell, but it'll be fine. I'm sure you guys can find it. It'll be great.
I like it. Yeah, I'll definitely put it in the show notes. You're going to have to send it to me, though, because I will not be able to spell that for the life of me.
Oh, no. Okay. My fears come true.
Awesome. So that'll be down in the show notes, so you guys can go check that out and continue this knowledge curve of technology if you're on that binge. But starting off our technology conversation is the video that Patrick alluded to earlier, which is a video that I sent to him that I've recently, it's been brought to my attention. I wanted to do an episode on it. It's by a YouTube channel by the name of Now You Know. And they do a little series called In Depth where they kind of take a piece of technology that's new and they analyze it and break down all of the company that's developing it and like what the tech consists of and what the future of that industry may look like because of this tech. And so they did a YouTube video called This Tractor Could Change Farming Forever. And it's about a company called Monarch, which, like Patrick said, is basically like the Tesla of agriculture, which is really cool. And they produce a self-driving electric tractor, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody has done farming, which I don't know anybody listening to this podcast who'd know anything about farming or anything, but being out in the field is hot, and so the fact that you could just send your tractor out to go do a whole bunch of stuff, watering and taking care of your crops and that kind of stuff would be awesome for you up to do other things. So I think that is super fantastic.
Well, it even goes back to a conversation that we had in actually the first episode I ever had you on for this show. It was the first episode of my second season, and the first episode that I had a non-ag guest on. And in it, we talked about the idea that we use robots in agriculture, and when we say robots, we don't mean Wall-E. And at that point, you left the episode, but but no, it was really cool to talk about conceptually this idea of like we have autonomous robotic vehicles that are going out and taking care of like the spraying and the watering and picking the crops and all that kind of stuff. And now we're actually seeing the physical representation of that conversation played out in this company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like these guys really know what they're talking about when they're making a tractor, because they're tackling problems that me being a non-ag person, I'm still aware of the problem of irrigation and that kind of stuff that tractors have to solve. And it sounds to me like they are really thinking outside the box in a positive way on how to make a battery-powered tractor feasible for a farmer, because things like hot swappable batteries, you can change out the battery on one of these tractors in like 10 minutes, and the tractor can run for 10 hours on a charge. So they can run for 10 hours, go do 10 minutes, swap out the pack, and put in a new battery pack, and then it can go back to work again. I mean, something like that, again, if you've ever worked on a tractor before, you get a breakdown, and it's major, and the whole operation stops, and you can't just, there is no such thing as a 10-minute repair for the most part. And so that's huge, where you're just basically no downtime. I mean, I would venture to say that probably fueling up takes 10 minutes on a tractor oftentimes. Maybe not that much, but it takes a little bit of time. So the fact that you can swap out batteries and just run for 10 hours, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, not to mention, in a lot of situations, depending on the operation, not only does it take 10 minutes just to fuel up, but you have to completely leave what you were doing, go and fill up, and then go back to where you were and resume your progress. With this, you could stop right in the middle of the field and just go out and switch the battery, and you're good to go.
Yeah, there's no fueling station. You take the battery back to the tractor, and it's ready to go.
Right, exactly. So that was a really cool idea. I thought that they did really well with, and you highlighted a really important point there, which was these guys understand agriculture. They understand the issues that they're facing, the challenges that they need to overcome, and what this tractor would need to do for it to be worth it for a farmer to buy. And that's something we're seeing in, like, there are definitely tech companies who are producing technology that is useful in agriculture, but you're seeing some that are producing tech just for the sake of it existing.
Yeah.
They're producing, because like the video mentioned, there are other companies that are producing electric tractors, but none of them are as efficient, as cost efficient, as effective at their job as this particular model that's being produced by Monarch. And we're seeing that happen a lot in ag is, these companies are producing tech. They're like, yeah, this electric tractor or this, self-driving or the self-operating drone or, all this stuff that's useful, but is it doing the job that the farmer needs it to do? And that question isn't always as clear as it can be. And this tractor 100% checks the box of what it needs to be doing.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I like how, like from edit. But
that's staying in there, bud.
Seriously, it's like, come on, mouth, work, words, come on, you can do this. But in the thought process of thinking exactly what you need, they make the tractor, I think, so 1.1 meters wide. So trying to fit in between rows of crops. Like, you can't typically drive a full-size tractor in between rows of crops and without wasting a ton of space. And they were thinking about that, where you can drive your tractor between the different rows and that kind of stuff. That's
right.
A really good thought process. And because if you don't have a pilot in there, you don't have to have it a certain size. It just goes and it just fits between the rows. No rhyme intended.
Yeah, so one of the most effective things, I mean, like you just mentioned, the tractor is narrower, so it can account for smaller rows when it comes to crops, which is huge. But I mean, one of the other big things that I thought was really interesting was that it had this whole like agrivoltaics thing that they kept throwing around, that word that nobody seems to know what it means, but basically they broke it down as this idea that, because I don't know if you caught, they have a link to an Oklahoma State or not Oregon State video attached to it that explains what agrivoltaics is.
No, but I wanted to look into that more. I didn't get a chance before the show. But is that where? Please stop me if I'm talking completely wrong. But is that the what they were talking about? How the light saturation points versus most of the time in agriculture you're doing more watering to keep the plant from burning up, and they were talking about using the solar panels to provide shade so that way they don't have to use as much water, or is that something completely different? Because I love that point, and I couldn't remember if that was agrivoltaics or not. So
no, you're definitely you definitely hit the nail right on the head. I mean, it's
okay.
Basically, agrivoltaics refers to food production using electricity, and so it's
okay.
mostly using like solar panels. Like in my in my local area, I see solar panels placed in fields like all the time. That's like a really common thing, and it's becoming more and more common with this whole agrivoltaics, like electric vehicle being introduced to ag sector kind of thing. We're seeing a ton of new ways of, because basically at the end of the day, agrivoltaics refers to a symbiotic relationship. It's the use of electricity producing technology that improves the life of a farm, and the farm improves the life of that technology. It's kind of like a they go back and forth.
Yeah.
So one of the, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I thought it was really cool how they were using and I think I'm derailing you a little bit, so we can, maybe not put this point in, I don't know, but I liked how they were talking about the solar panels moving to catch the sun, but also to let the plants catch sun, and maybe in the less harsh sunlight, so they can just move everything around to get the plants what they need, but they could also catch a lot of sun, because it makes a lot of sense. You have big wide open fields catching lots of sun, so using the solar panels in those fields when you can to generate electricity, I thought that was super smart, in conjunction with these electric tractors. I mean, you could, in theory, run everything off of solar just off of what you're making there, which is awesome. I mean, that's what a farm ideally is there to do, is to live off the land and to make more than you eat, essentially. And so that's super cool that they could do that with electricity as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and that's been a big push lately in the agriculture industry, is to try to find new ways to, for one, lower the environmental damage that agriculture causes, because it doesn't matter how much you support the industry, you have to acknowledge that producing food is going to cause some level of environmental damage, and so this new technology serves a great goal that agriculture has been trying to look towards, which is reducing their environmental damage and increasing their efficiency while doing so, and being able to reduce water waste, which is a huge deal here in California, because as I'm sure you know, we don't have water. So
you have earthquakes.
We have earthquakes, but we have no water. That is accurate. So like,
but
having
85% of the world's water use in ag, I did not know that. So 85% of the fresh water use is for ag, which is crazy town. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but that is crazy. And most of it's wasted because of these agrivoltaics. You got, it's not, the water is used to keep the plants from burning up, but if you could shade them with solar panels, you could make electricity, save water. I thought that was huge. Way more interesting than the CO2 emission reduction, in my opinion.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think that a big part of that gets kind of left out of the conversation is, when we think of, 85% of water use being pushed towards agriculture and a ton of that water being wasted, a lot of people are quick to blame, like, oh yeah, well, agriculture in the United States is really wasteful. There's a certain degree that it is, but a lot of the wasted water goes towards a lot of those underdeveloped countries that rely on agriculture. So like India, which India is not underdeveloped by any means, but their agricultural systems definitely are. But a lot of like African countries, even like Asian countries, that focus really heavily on agriculture, but they don't have refined technology to try to mitigate some of that water loss. It's not just it's not just American agriculture that wastes water, but that definitely is a big concern that's been going on for a while. Especially like I mentioned in my home of the Golden State, we don't have water to waste. I mean, like, that is the number one issue that all farmers in California are facing, is how to use the water that we do have as smart as possible. I mean, we used to make jokes whenever I would go out of state and we run into like kids from other states that find out we're from California. It'd start raining and we're like, hey, what's this? And they're like, what do you mean it's rain? And we're like, what's this rain you speak of? We don't get this in California. And
seriously.
But it goes back to this whole idea that we don't have a lot of water to waste, and even California being one of the top agricultural producing state in the country, it produces 99% of the crops grown in the entire nation. only 40% of the water that California gets goes towards agriculture. So we really don't have that much water to use, even on top of the lack of water that we get as a state.
Wow.
So
you have to do something.
Yes, exactly. I mean, like, infrastructure would be great, but technology is really our best option right now to try to waste as little water as possible and allocate water as efficiently as possible to where we need it. That's why drip irrigation has become so much more popular. That's why even like certain genetically modified crops that are better at handling droughts, they're able to retain water for longer periods of time and not waste the water that's given to them. There's all kinds of new technologies that are emerging to try to deal with it, but this could be a game changer because, like you said, it not only prevents water waste, but it produces clean electricity or clean energy too, which is another big challenge that agriculture is facing right now.
Yeah, I mean that makes a huge difference because, again, if you can charge your electric tractor and you can power your house and then keep everything lit up with your own solar, then that's huge. And I don't remember. This is a side note. I remember seeing on Twitter, I believe, so it's 100% legit, 100%. You got to believe everything you see on Twitter. But I think Absolutely. I saw, yeah, 100%. But I think I saw that if you were to cover so it was a map showing how much land area is available in the United States. Something like 100 million acres or something like that. And I think if you covered a tiny portion the size of an itty bitty portion of a state, like you could put it in the middle of nowhere, and cover it with solar panels, you could power the entire grid of the United States. So it's interesting to me as this kind of technology spreads from areas that have to have it, like California, where there's no water, to areas that maybe don't have to have it, but they can generate power and still save money, and so it becomes economically viable. It's interesting to me how how much more of our grid could potentially be powered by solar, just because of, well, hey, I can power my own house and run my farm, and also I can pass more back to the grid and have potentially more private power, not just monopolies. I don't know. I'm thinking out of my head now. So, but the potential for private, because if people aren't aware, if you a lot of places that do solar on the roof, not farms, just regular homes, it doesn't run off of the solar. You essentially, in most places, you get a credit back from the power company, so you're still connected to the grid. And they calculate how much power you generated, and then they give you a credit. So you used 200 watts, kilowatts of power, and you generated 210 kilowatts of power. So we're going to give you a credit back, and you just got this this month for free, essentially. And I don't really like that, but if everyone was doing that, or maybe they could collectively make business out of it. I mean, there's a lot of potential here, I think. And again, kind of tangenting a little bit, but I'm excited about that. I think that's really cool, especially you can save water, make electricity. I'm down for it.
No, you're definitely onto something. I mean, there's a lot of potential there for this technology to be further utilized in other industries and even in like the domestic markets. I mean, solar is something that's been around for a while now, but it hasn't quite reached its full potential in terms of efficiency and utility and financial viability. But it seems like it's definitely reaching that point now, which is incredibly impressive for that industry, and it's also going to be. I think it's going to be largely utilized in a lot of different industries that are relying more and more on technology. I mean, like agriculture, for example.
Oh, the future is bright, if you will. See, dad jokes. I told you.
you did deliver on your promise. But no, one of the other big things I really wanted to touch on that they talked about in the video was kind of first of all the tech involved, and also what this means for the future of agriculture and for the future of electricity as electric producing technology. So like we mentioned earlier, not only is this not only is Monarch the Tesla of agriculture, but they actually have a former Tesla employee working for them.
Yes.
I didn't get his name, but were you able to catch some of the stuff that he did for Tesla when he was over there?
I don't remember. It seems like he was a pretty high ranking person, though. It wasn't just a ground level engineer or whatever. I think he was a director or something like that. So he had a pretty. He talked up his credentials pretty high. So whether or not it was to be, I going off of what he said, he seemed like he knew what in the world he was talking about. They had some really good ideas. So I don't remember what position though.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I can't remember what he said he was either, but he seemed like he was one of the big idea guys at Tesla, and he even said that a lot of his ideas for this company were based off of Tesla's ideas as well, which it doesn't seem like they really crossed any, legal red tape. It seems like a lot of it was pretty well approved. But it was definitely a really interesting. It was really interesting to see Tesla get transferred over into the ag sphere, which that's not something that has really happened yet. And it's something that I think is great potential because, I mean, everyone and their mother today has been paying attention to what's been going on with Tesla. I mean, it's a really, massive company that's been getting a ton of headlines lately. Everyone knows about the cars and the technology that's been coming out. Like, everyone's excited about what Tesla is doing. And to have Tesla technology being integrated even into food production, I think just expands the conversation even more to just what this technology is capable of.
Absolutely. And I like that they didn't take a one-size-fits-all approach. So something that was interesting to me was how their approach to automation is, because the automation for a car on the road is completely different than the automation for going between rows of crops or how to navigate uneven terrain and that kind of stuff. And they really thought about that. Now, they were a little bit vague on how they were approaching that, admittedly, at least in the video, but the fact that they even mentioned that's something that I wouldn't have considered, not at first glance, but the fact that they mentioned it and they were thinking about, because in some ways, staying on a conventional road is easier because you stay between the yellow line and the white line and don't run into the cars in front of you. And now, granted, it's at speed. They have their own challenges. But, in some ways, a tractor, it doesn't have anything to go off of. Like, okay, how do I differentiate this one kind of plant that's good and this one kind of plant that's bad? And then how do I know when to turn? How do I know, here's something walking out here. Is this a friend? Is this a human? Or is this an animal that needs to be, scared off or whatever? There is so many variables there that this tractor, to be smart, has to be really smart. That they're thinking about that stuff. So I think that's a really good sign. Whether or not it comes out to practice, hey, that's remains to be seen. But they're looking to deliver tractors this year. So apparently they're working on this problem, and it's a solvable problem because they're delivering.
Right, yeah. The fact that they were so far along in their production that they were able to actually produce or sell, tangible product was really incredible to me. But no, it's exactly what you're talking about. They have gotten the science so precise now that they're able to do things that a lot of people wouldn't even be able to factor into, like you mentioned, like Teslas or different electric vehicles that are already on the road today. It's something that kind of incorporates a new branch of technology that has been involved in agriculture for a few years now. It's been kind of talked about like under the shadows a little bit, but it's starting to get more and more attention, and that's a precision agriculture. I don't know if we talked about that before on the podcast. I can't really remember.
That term sounds familiar, but let me rephrase. The term doesn't sound familiar, but the idea does. So maybe refresh. It's been a minute since we talked anyway.
It has. So precision agriculture, mostly refers to technology that is able to basically pinpoint specific areas of an agricultural operation. So it can be anywhere from GPS mapping that allows autonomous tractors to follow the mapped out path that is set before them. That way you're avoiding some of the issues that we were talking about earlier with the tractor not quite knowing where to go. It can be as something as complex as a drone that flies over like a field of crops and can do heat signatures to figure out where the highest concentration of pests are, or where the highest concentration of whether it be squirrels or bugs or even like bacteria and infections going on certain plants. They can detect that. Precision agriculture can go into even like the soil. It can detect moisture content in soil and tell whether or not the crops are being irrigated enough. It can tell whether or not the microbiomes and the nutrients of the soil are sufficient for the crops to be able to grow properly. Basically, it gives that more in-depth look to provide a lot of the security against errors that could occur with this technology. So pairing that autonomous driving electric tractor with this new precision ag that's been out for a few years now, there's definitely a lot of potential for agriculture to get a lot more specific and a lot more efficient.
do you think seeing how much they can drill down, do you think you'll start to see more, this is a bit of a side note, but do you think you'll be able to see more farmers getting really specific on the types of crops that they grow, so that way they could really drill down? So you may see farmers who only farm corn or only farm maybe a specific type of soybean or something. You think you'll see more of that? Or maybe one farmer does multiple things, but you start to see a lot more of, and you probably see some of this now, but maybe a huge portion of just corn, where they would mix and match more. What do you think about that? Am I just talking on my butt?
So that's actually something that we kind of struggle with right now as an industry. It's that, as soon as one crop gets really popular, everyone wants to grow that crop. In my hometown, we didn't see cotton growing for like the longest time. Like, it used to be huge, and then just everyone stopped growing cotton. And then a few years ago, all of a sudden the cotton market just boomed, and then everyone was growing cotton again. So that kind of stuff is already kind of happening to a degree. I mean, there's actually a period, I can't remember when it was now. I want to say it was in the early 20th century, but it might have even been before that, that the government had to pay farmers to stop growing corn because we had so much corn, it was just messing up the markets. So like that is going to happen regardless. I don't think that precision ag can really do a whole lot about it, but I think what will happen with this technology is that we're going to get to a point where certain areas of land are going to be analyzed, and they're going to be basically given a list of like, here's your content of nutrients for this soil. Here are crops that can be grown to the best of their quality in the soil. And we're going to see a lot more kind of specialization into certain types of crops in certain areas of the country than we were before, which we're already kind of seeing that. I mean, we have the corn belt, we have the cotton belt, we have, the Midwest that's mostly cattle, corn, and soybeans. I mean, that's all they grow out there.
Yeah.
But, seeing that level of precision happen on that scale might even open up the opportunity for us to grow things that we didn't even know we could grow because we didn't realize what content of minerals were in, specific areas of soil. So I think that in terms of, expanding the industry to, people realizing that they'd be able to grow this thing here when they couldn't before is a high possibility. But I don't see it being as much of an issue with people, only growing one thing or growing a bunch of things depending on what the precision ag can tell them. If that makes any sense.
Yes, that makes sense. And yeah, I hadn't even thought about but as you're drilling down more into what a specific plant needs, I mean, I hadn't even thought about opening up additional types of farming that you could do in an area that you didn't know was available because you're like, oh, well, these minerals actually are really conducive to soybeans. We don't even grow soybeans here. So yeah, I think that is a huge advancement.
Yeah. Now, I hope that that's the direction that we go with this because, I mean, we're constantly looking for new areas to grow food because we're running out of land like by the day. I mean, agricultural operations are getting smaller and smaller, and, actually, the average farm is getting bigger and bigger, but that's because all the small farms are going away, so it sets off the average. But a lot of agricultural land is being converted into urban land. So we're seeing, massive amounts of scarcity in certain crops just because we can't grow it because we don't have anywhere to grow it, And so I think that having this new opportunity with this technology to be able to show us like, oh, well, I know that it's, we don't really grow anything there right now, but it actually has a ton of potential because its soil is full of selenium, which is really important in growing, corn or it's really important in growing cotton or whatever. And so like, it might not be an issue for the crops that we grow like on a massive scale right now, such as corn or cotton or soybeans. But for something like, I don't know, strawberries, like, this is completely hypothetical, but let's just say like, in Montana, they find out that this one little patch of Montana that's not super, super cold has a very high, nutrient content that's sufficient for growing strawberries. They could grow strawberries in an area it's never been grown before. So I don't think it'll, necessarily impact the large scale crops that we already see a lot of, but it might help with a lot of the smaller scale crops that we usually have to trade with other countries to get.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned Montana because my first thought was, I wonder if that would open up areas that were previously less conducive or completely unconducive to farming. Like I'm thinking of the more deserty areas of the country, or more mountainous areas. Would that open those areas up more to, like I say, smaller crops, or farming in a way that we hadn't thought of before?
And I think that potentially could. I mean, a lot of the issue with them is also temperature as well. I mean, obviously it's too cold in Montana to grow, some fruits and vegetables, and it's too hot in, Nevada, for example, to grow some fruits and vegetables. So there definitely needs to be a balance in terms of climate, but in terms of, soil composition and some of the resources available, like precision ag basically paves the way for a lot of things to be possible that we didn't previously know were possible in agriculture.
Well, if you cover everything with solar panels, then maybe it's not so sunny over there in the desert.
And that could be an option too. I mean, kind of balancing that, that agrivoltaics, technology like we were talking earlier, that might be the ticket to unlocking some of that land for agricultural use. It's definitely possible.
Absolutely. We got a lot of desert out there.
We sure do, and we definitely need to use it for something.
Other than soaking up all our rain.
Yeah, give that rain over to California. We really need it.
Exactly. It's like, hey, we'll trade you rain we'll give you solar panels if you give us rain. How about that?
Yeah. Yeah, we got
make a deal with Mother Nature.
Yeah, we got Silicon Valley. They can go over there and build you all kinds of stuff to use up all that sun you get. Just give us all the rain, and then we'll make good use of it.
Sounds like we've got a deal.
But there is another portion of the conversation that they didn't really talk about as much in the video, but this is almost more of a speculative thing that I wanted to cover. And that is kind of the future of agriculture in relation to the, both the agrivoltaic technology, but also like the autonomous, self-driving, those are the same thing. I don't know why I said that. That was redundant. But, the autonomous electric vehicle type, technology that we're seeing involved in agriculture. So basically, I know that in a previous episode, you and I talked about the revolutions of agriculture.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure you're still. I want to make sure you didn't disconnect or something.
No. We had a little bit of cutting out. I'm like, okay, yeah, yes, I'm still here.
Okay, just making sure. But yeah, so I know in a previous episode we talked about the several different revolutions of agriculture. The implementation of tractors being the second revolution, and the green revolution being the third, which is like chemicals and pesticides and that sort of thing. The fourth is the one that's like kind of debated about. I believe that we are currently in a kind of historic moment in agriculture because we're at a point where two separate revolutions are happening at the same time.
Which ones? You said, I think we talked about the GMOs being part of it, like a scientific revolution. What's the other?
So that scientific revolution, I think, could even be expanded further into kind of a new technological revolution that is automated farming. So, like we talked about the autonomous tractor, that's a big part of it, and a lot of the robots and that sort of thing. That technology being combined with GMOs and also with new, well, actually they're not new, they're very old methods of farming, like regenerative agriculture that focuses on tilling less and preserving soil health and all that kind of fun stuff. But basically that one's more on like the industry side, productivity type side of agriculture. That's what I consider like the new tech revolution of agriculture. And I think that there's a secondary revolution of agriculture happening that's a blending of urban and rural types of agriculture. So you see vertical farming and more urban type gardens and a lot of integration of agricultural technology in urban areas, and even exposing people who are from urban areas to what's going on in agriculture, kind of like we're talking right now with, everyone's all over Tesla. Well, if they found out that the same tech that's in a Tesla car is actually being used in a tractor, that might kind of engage them in some new conversations that they hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And honestly, I think like the urban farms, there's a lot of that kind of stuff happening. I think with 2020 and people being locked down and wanting to, part of it is boredom, and part of it is, I want to have some fresh food, and so you got a lot of people doing little square gardens and that kind of stuff. I mean, that we do a lot of that. We don't have a lot of property where we're at, and my wife in our last house had a very small yard, and she had a couple little square gardens, and where we're at now, we've expanded that, which is nice. And so, yeah, and a lot of people in her circle in more urban areas are just doing what they can to grow little home gardens, and I think that's a very micro scale to what you're talking about, but I feel like it's becoming more in a public consciousness than it might have been 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a good point you brought up. It's very minuscule now compared to, the industry as a whole. But I think that these revolutions are kind of happening like almost like, the automatic revolution, I think I'm going to call it, is, the one that's very tech based, very, method based, GMOs, all that kind of stuff being implemented. That one I'm considering kind of the fourth revolution. And that one, like, we're like smack dab in the middle of it. And I think the urban rural kind of blending revolution, that's, more people are starting to go back to the farm, more people are starting to garden, more people are taking an interest in where their food comes from, and almost rather, almost a concern with where their food is coming from as well. More people are being cognizant of, what's going on in the industry than they have in the past probably 20 years. All of these things are happening, simultaneously, but that's almost a revolution that's like just beginning. So we're like halfway through one, and we're just getting ready to start another one.
Where do you see that going?
That's a good question. It's hard to say. I think that it's going to create kind of like a strange, climate for agriculture as a whole, and for the world as a whole. I think that we're going to see a lot more people involved in agriculture than we ever expected to, which is, in my opinion, fantastic. And I think that a lot of people in agriculture are going to be hesitant to it at first because they get very stuck in their, if you don't grow up on a farm, you don't understand my struggles kind of mentality, which I think is the wrong way to go about it. But I think as we encourage people to get more involved in the ag industry, whether it be in a tech job, whether it be in just, being publicly aware of some of the things that are going on and being able to speak about them and vote on issues that are, revolving around agriculture and that sort of thing, we're going to start to see kind of this hybrid of rural and urban communities that I'm really looking forward to, because this is something I've been preaching forever, that we can't keep separating the rural from the urban because it starts to get really sticky. We have to acknowledge that, we're all people, we're all eating the food. Just because we're not all producing the food doesn't mean we don't all eat it. So we need to come together and be able to work together on how that food should be produced more efficiently and how to be, safe with it and all that sort of stuff. So I think we're in a really awkward point in the revolutions because we're in such a transitionary period that's really exciting, but a lot of people don't know what's going to happen next. I think within the next probably, if I had to guess, I'd say 20 to maybe 30 years, we're going to see a lot more of a transition into that kind of hybridization. We're going to see a lot more urban style farms, like small gardens and vertical farming and hydroponics being implemented. We're going to see a lot more advanced technology that uses the same kind of technology that we're seeing in domestic, vehicles in the, agricultural sphere. Probably more implementation of, green energy like solar panels and that sort of type of technology. Even like methane digesters and that kind of stuff might be implemented more. It's really hard to say what it's going to look like, but it's not going to look like what we have today. It's not going to be farm and city anymore. I think it's going to be a lot closer to, farm and then like farm city and then city. We're going to see a lot more crossover than I think people are expecting.
Well, I mean, I think I like your idea of everybody coming together because, we could all use a little bit of that right now. Not just farming speaking, politically speaking, more so. It's like there's so much vitriol going on, so it's like, if we could all just come together, wear one another's shoes, we all could stand to get along.
So, I agree with that. And that is the whole message of my show is like, hey, if we can't agree on anything, can we at least agree on that we all need food?
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's like we all need to eat, right? So let's work together so we can all continue to eat. How about that?
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I think that there are a couple other pieces that I wanted to touch on from the video, and then I wanted to get your thoughts on some things.
Okay.
So the first one is the misconceptions that they kind of brushed over, because I mean, understandably, they don't have the best perception of what farmers are like because farmers don't really address the public quite as often as they used to. And there's this perception that farmers are very, unintelligent or very just disconnected from the technological world, that they're just kind of stuck in their ways. And to some degree, some farmers are like that. But there's definitely a misconception surrounding farmers not being tech savvy. I mean, most of the farmers that I've met, sure, they may struggle with their iPhone, but they can function, a tractor like this or like a drone or, super advanced technology, milking machines and all this kind of stuff that the average person wouldn't understand how it works, but that farmer knows how to do it because that's his bread and butter right there.
Everybody's expert in their own thing. Not everybody's expert on an iPhone because they don't, most people don't make a living off an iPhone. Yeah, but if you make a living off a milking machine, you better know how to use that milking machine.
Exactly. And so, it kind of, I'm not going to say that it rubbed me the wrong way, but hearing that, I was kind of like, that's interesting. People still think that farmers are not tech savvy when they use technology that's more advanced than like most of the tech that people use in their daily lives. So that was a big thing. And also like farmers not needing precision tech. Like we just discussed, precision tech has a massive impact on the ag industry, and more farmers like by the day are adapting it to their operations. So we're seeing that come out more and more. So that was a big thing. One of the really big things I wanted to touch on was, people kept, in the video kept saying, well, if this tractor gets produced, then it's going to be huge because farmers, can take more time off and they can relax more and they won't have to worry as much about, focusing on the farm. You and I both played Stardew Valley.
I snickered at that a little bit. I'm like, come on, guys. That's like saying whenever you're at a job and you make this super powered spreadsheet that cuts your time in spreadsheets in half. Does that mean that you get to take a nap for the rest of the day at work? No, it means you get to do other projects.
Exactly.
It's like, come on, man, that ain't real.
And as we've learned from our favorite farming simulator, Stardew Valley, just because you make something more efficient does not mean you get to take any time off. I mean,
no.
We talked about this in our last episode together. I mean, we produce, the most powerful sprinkler so we don't have to water that morning. We still got to go collect the milk and the eggs and the wool and all that sort of stuff. We still have to go to town and talk to people. We still have to make connections. Like, it opens up time for other things, but you do not have leisure time by any means.
No. You gotta go slay the skeletons down in the cave. Literally
Exactly.
and figuratively.
Exactly. And farmers are slaying those skeletons all the time. I mean, efficiency is always the key of agriculture, not because farmers are lazy, but because they have way too many things to focus on to just not have that time spared.
Exactly. To my friends who maybe only have just a little bit of land, imagine how much time it takes to landscape and maybe have a little garden and do a little mowing and this and that. It takes a better part of a weekend. Imagine that times hundreds or thousands of acres. And it's like, you think for just a minute, if they don't have to water the garden or can spend a little less time harvesting, you don't think that there's not something else they need to be doing on those hundreds and thousands of acres? Nah, there's still plenty of work that needs to be done.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that I was kind of chuckling at too, because I was just like, they have no idea just how much work is going on those operations. It's not as simple as they just wash the tractor all day. Like, there's a million one other things that they could be doing. But,
I thought it was really interesting how economical these tractors are, because potentially they could spend the money they were going to spend on a regular tractor and then maybe use some money to hire hands to do other things. I feel like this is one of those cases where automation may actually make more jobs as opposed to reduce the number of people who need to work, because it seems like so often automation reduces jobs, because that's why you spend so much more money on an expensive robot, so you don't have to hire hands to go out and do a worse job. In this particular instance, you're spending the same money you would have spent, because tractors are expensive, and maybe could free you up, because it does so much more, that you free up funds that you could use to hire other people to do other things. So hire more people to do more jobs and get more things done. I think that's huge. But anyway, I derailed you a little bit there, but I just wanted to make that point since we were there. I thought that was a really cool thing, that this isn't going to cost $500,000 or something.
No, and it's funny you say that, because that perfectly transitioned to the point I was about to make, which was, another misconception that people think this is going to take up the jobs of everybody. So that kind of worked out, but
perfect. Totally.
Yeah,
I'm reading your mind there.
Yeah, like I said, we're on the same wavelength again. But no, I mean, like you mentioned, this solves a massive issue that's been facing agriculture recently, which is equipment is getting more and more expensive and less available. I mean, it's providing, like you mentioned, a product that is of the same, if not better quality, and it's for a very similar price, which saves the farmer a lot of headache trying to find equipment that is going to be high enough quality and cheap enough that's not going to break their bank. And like you mentioned, it's going to replace some jobs, but it's going to open up other ones. I mean, this has always been my argument again, for technology. When people say, "Oh, well, developing new technology just takes away the job from somebody else," it's like, well, yeah, well, that also asks that person to upgrade their skills a little bit. That way, they can get the new job of operating it. the tractor replaced many jobs when it was invented. This is going to replace some other jobs, but it's going to create new ones because people are going to have to be technicians for this thing. They're going to have to operate it. They're going to have to understand how to, change out the batteries for it and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, we're facing one of the largest labor shortages in agriculture that we've ever seen. There are definitely other jobs out there that this tractor is not going to replace.
Absolutely. And so I'm definitely interested to see where it goes because it's hard to predict what will change until you just get into it. But the potential's huge.
Yes, absolutely. So, and speaking of potential, there is another point that I wanted to bring up, which was the educational potential for this, because this is an educational podcast. I got to find some way to use this to teach people. So, one of the things I think is really great about this is that, kind of like we were just mentioning, this opens up opportunities for people who do not come from agricultural backgrounds but still have an interest in technology. Showing people how much tech is involved in ag, and talking about this whole electric vehicle transition into the agriculture industry. You're going to see a lot of people who are computer scientists, who are technologists, who are inventors, who are designers of artificial intelligence and that kind of stuff, start to take an interest in agriculture, and that could open up a huge job market for them that we need help with, because we don't have people in those positions, and it's going to open up a lot of possibility for people who maybe they're trying to go to Silicon Valley and there's no jobs there, so they're trying to find anywhere else to work. Well, we need some help on the farm, and it's not to milk cows.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge. So obviously the market potential is huge because there's a lot of farmers out there, but how do you see it going about trying to sell to farmers who maybe not? We talked about them being farmers. We talked about them not being technologically savvy, but oftentimes they're set in the ways of how they've done things in the past. How would you see getting these new technologies created and then selling them to farmers in a way that farmers are able and willing to receive them? Does that make sense? Do you see that being a good market? Because there's definitely potential. There's so much, just how cool this is. Like, it's one of those things like, more people should be doing that because that's awesome. But how well do you see that being sold to a farmer who has bought John Deere forever and like, I'm not buying anything else? John Deere does not break. I don't know who Monarch is. Who's going to fix my Monarch when it breaks? And so how do you see marketing going for those kind of these new technology companies?
No, I think that's an excellent point. It's important to have that in mind as we kind of go forward. I think that it's going to be difficult at first. I mean, it's going to take some time for the industry to really adapt to this new technology. And so the average age of the American farmer right now is about 58 years old, and he's getting older. So obviously we're going to have a lot of older generation farmers that are not going to adapt to this very well. They're going to be, like you mentioned, stuck in their ways of, John Deere is my company. I'm not ever trading to anyone else. And we very likely won't ever reach those guys. But what we're seeing right now is a very steady, I mean, we're trying our hardest to get to expand more, but we're seeing a slight increase in the younger generation of farmers adapting to this technology. And I think that that's the market that we go for. It's probably not likely that we're going to get some of the older generation farmers in on this, but if we get guys that are, in like the early fatherhood age, like late 20s, early 30s, that are starting farms and they're busy with other aspects of their life, they're going to see this as a very positive advantage, especially in the face of the labor shortage that we've been talking about, and in the face of all the regulations and the different environmental factors. This is going to be a big deal for them. So I don't think that it's going to be massively accepted by the entire agricultural community, at least not for a while. But if we get the younger guys on board, which I don't think will be hard, eventually the older guys will start to see just how much time and money that they're saving by using that product, and they will eventually convert as well. And we're seeing this with other technology as well.
Yeah. What other technologies are you seeing it in?
So one of the big ones has been carousel barns. So in the dairy industry, we have carousels, which are basically it's just like it sounds. It's like a giant spinning wheel that we stick cows on while they're milking, and it calms the cows down and it collects the milk a lot more efficiently. You can fit more cows into it in a smaller space, and it's a lot cheaper than an old milk barn, and it's basically just a lot more efficient. It's a technology that we didn't see a whole lot of older farmers adapting to because they were like, well, my milk barn works just fine. But until the younger guys started using it, all of a sudden they started to realize, oh, these guys are saving a lot more time. They're using a lot more cows in a lot smaller of a space, and the cows are happier. They're healthier. The milk is a lot more efficient, and it's being collected at a better rate. I mean, just seeing the benefits, because farmers are number people, right? I mean, they like seeing the positive reactions to some of these technologies before they start implementing them. If you can get the younger guys in on it first, the farmers are likely to be like, oh, well, that's saving him money, so I want to try that too. We're seeing the same thing with methane digesters. I mean, currently the state government is incentivizing some farmers, especially younger farmers, to adapt to methane digesters, which are basically giant, biomass converters that take in the methane that cows produce and convert it into a usable energy source. And this isn't being widely adapted by some of the older generation farmers, but it is by some of the younger ones. And we're starting to see that the age of the people who are using this technology is going up and up. And it's not just because those people are getting older, it's because the average farmer that is using that technology is starting to realize that it's a generally good technology to implement for efficiency and for cost effectiveness. And so we're seeing older generations adapt that as well.
That's a good idea. I mean, like I say, well, what farmers, especially, your traditional, classic, what you think of as a farmer, I guess, they are very numbers driven. They've been running a business for years, a lot of times family business. So they've been helping run business since they were children. So they're very, very attuned to the numbers. And so, yeah, I think that makes sense where somebody who's a little more, the younger generation might be a little more willing to take a risk. I think that's a good one to market to, and they'll be typically more tech savvy too. So they'll be, whenever things are going well for them, the older generation's like, all right, I'm willing to give it a shot now. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's just like with anything else, until you show them because especially with the older generation, I mean, like you just mentioned, young guys, they're willing to take the risk because they're almost like a not necessarily like what do I have to lose kind of mentality, but very similar to that kind of risk analysis. Those older guys, though, if you can show them like, hey, not only is this going to make your job way easier, it's going to make you more money, and you know how you're like on the verge of having to sell the farm because of all this will get rid of that problem. Like even some of the hardest headed farmers are going to see the benefit of that, and they're going to adapt to it. If they don't, then the market's probably going to eat them up anyway, and somebody else will take their place, which sounds really harsh. Don't get me wrong, I don't want that to happen, but a lot of those older farmers are getting to the point where they just want to keep farming how they're farming until they retire anyways. And like I said, we may not ever convince them, and that's perfectly fine. But as long as we convince the younger guys to start adapting it, you'll start to see a domino effect as you continue up the supply chain.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I actually had some questions that I thought would be kind of fun to pick your brain about.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm down. I'm ready. Let's go.
So, since we're talking about new technology in agriculture and beneficial ways to produce food, if you could design a new piece of technology for food collection or production or anything along those lines, what would you like to see?
That's difficult. But I'm gonna go outside the box a little bit, because it's easy to think of it. Now, granted, I'm not gonna make this, so this is somebody else's job. This is free brainstorming for some helpful Silicon Valley person out there. I don't need this to be Silicon Valley. This may be more of an engineering problem. But anyway, everybody thinks about the type of sorter, automatic sorting that will sort out your various nuts and fruits and things like that shake stuff out, and then you dump in a whole bunch of stuff and out comes a bunch of apples. Those exist. That's the thing. What I'm thinking about, what about like an automatic? And this may be maybe a slight content warning here, but what about like an automatic butchering? Like so, like whenever it's time to for meat, for cows or pigs or whatever, an automatic butchering, so that, because right now that's still a very manual process. You have a butcher and you cut up the various pieces of meat. So I wonder if having an automated system that would cut that up, completely automatically. You put in a cow and you come out with steaks and ground beef and various cuts and all that, and it's all perfect. something like that would, to me, make sense. I don't know. I may maybe being too morbid, maybe too much of a content warning. I don't know, but something like that I think would be huge, because then potentially you have less middlemen between the farm and the store. So if the farmer could run their cow through the machine, and then out comes the meat. They could sell it directly to the store, maybe make more of their own money, and keep some of the distribution costs down. That might be, and you get more farm fresh meat. So I don't know, just something that's also an ancient technology, because we're going to plant-based meat, and so I don't know. I'm talking out of my head, but I don't know. It just seemed interesting on the spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it'd be really interesting to explore. I think that, which is funny, because as you were saying it, I was like, well, there might be reasons why that can't work, because the cow might be moving a lot, or might because they have to line things up. And then I was thinking about it, I was like, that's probably what most people said about most industries before we automated them. So I'm sure it's very much possible. It's just a matter of finding a way to do it efficiently and in a way that's both humane and isn't going to obviously isn't going to cause the animal any pain. But
I'm thinking well after the animal is no longer with us,
right.
So it's like, don't worry, little cow, just come right down the chute, and there we go. And now we have steak. It's like, what just happened? Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's steak.
Interesting. That would be really cool. I mean, I can't imagine that it'd be incredibly difficult to produce. I mean, if you just save that, that process of actually putting, the animal out, then for humans, and then you just like hang them up by the foot, and then everything else is taken care of via machine. I could very easily see that being the case.
That's what I mean. Almost like you do milking, but it does the butchering, and so that's kind of what I have in mind.
Right. Yeah, and it really wouldn't be that hard to detect, like fat to muscle ratio in that case, and then you'd be able to like make cuts around like where the fat is. That way the muscle gets separated perfectly, and I definitely don't see that being an issue at all. I just it would depend on how precise you would want the technology and that sort of thing. So like maybe it just makes like the general cuts, and then you have to like go in there specifically to get like a ribeye versus a brisket versus like that kind of stuff.
I think something like that, for it to work, it would really need to be super precise, because one of the selling points would need to be less waste. And so, because if you're wasting meat, then that's not, I mean, just saving some time is not enough selling point. It would need to be more precise for it to be viable, I would think.
That is true. Yeah, that's a good point. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I think that'd be. I mean, that's definitely not what I was expecting, but that is definitely a very very possible piece of technology, I think.
What were you expecting? What would you have liked to seen? Have seen?
I was definitely not expecting the animal industry. If I'm being honest, like I was expecting something along the lines of like, because obviously we have some types of crops that can be picked more efficiently with robotics. I mean, like walnuts and other like tree nuts, we can shake them off the tree, or we have certain crops that can be picked. I don't know if citrus has been automated yet. I know that we mostly pick it by hand, but I don't know if certain operations are automating it. I don't think so. But even like corn, we have like a machine that can just harvest it all at once. I would be interested in seeing. Or this is kind of the direction that I was somewhat expecting you to go. This is where I would go with it as well. Something that could more precisely pick small fruits, so like berries, like blueberries, strawberries, like those like very small fruits that are very delicate and are not easy to pick. Because the only reason we haven't automated them is because any machine that touches them, they'll explode immediately. So
yeah. And they're pretty well adhered to the bush too, like blueberries and that kind of stuff. Comparatively speaking, I mean, you can
right.
pull them off with your hand, but you can't shake it. You can't. So
right, exactly. So what it would look like, I'm not entirely sure, but like I just imagine like a Dr. Seuss like backpack that just has like hands coming out of it that just like grab all the berries. I
mean, that would be sick.
Yeah, not quite the level of realism that I think would be necessary, but. Like that is kind of the general outline that I would go for, something that could really accurately and precisely pick fruit that can't be harvested via machine right now.
What do you mean it's not realistic? I want a hand pack right now.
I'll deliver him with your Wally.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, and then one of the other questions I had was, so going back to the electric, autonomous tractor. What do you think is the coolest part of this new tech?
Man, that so much of it. I mean, I feel like I love how modular that they were making things. So I already mentioned the hot swappable battery. That's really cool. I thought it was really neat how it could charge on regular 220 volts and 220 outlets in 4 to 5 hours. So it can operate for 10 hours and can charge in 4 to 5 in a plug-in that most farmers already have on their property somewhere. So that's really cool. I just love how they were also thinking about, Tesla is going for miles. You want to get this many miles on a charge, whereas these guys, Monarch, was thinking about doing hours of operation, which is way more important to a farmer because any hours down is time not making money. So I those processes that they were thinking about really made sense for the product they were making, and so you could tell that a lot of people were thinking very smartly about the target demographic that they were shooting for.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think that's really interesting. I think one of the things that really attracted my eye was the agrivoltaics. The whole being able to conserve more water and waste less less material in the production. Like I think that part was really cool. I'm with you on the whole focusing on hours instead of mileage, because that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to equipment is how long can you run it before you need to stop running it. I think that was really cool that they had that in mind, and that just how much thought they put into the actual concerns the farmers are going to be dealing with is just incredible to me.
I agree, and quibbles aside of taking vacation and things like that, I think aside from those little details, I feel like they really did do a good job of really encapsulating who their market is and the kind of person who'd want to be buying it. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. One thing I don't recall from the video, is this tractor actually drivable by a human as well, or is it only able to be automated or remotely controlled? I forget, because it being only 1.5 feet or only a little over 1 foot wide, that's not a lot of room for a person inside. So I'm wondering, I can't remember if they were doing it where it could be piloted by a human inside.
I didn't see anything in the video that suggested that. It did look like it had a cab, but I'm not sure if that was just for the computer. As far as I can tell, just from the size of the tractor as a whole, it probably can't be piloted unless you have a really, really small person. But if I had to guess, I would say it was probably mostly remote.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. And I noticed the cabin as well, but it was kind of hard to tell. It's like it doesn't look like a place for a person to sit. I'm not sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I was just curious.
Yeah. So is there anything about this new technology that concerns you at all?
No. No, I don't. I mean, I don't think so. I think they really hit a lot of the pain points. I mean, I think the big question for this is going to be the big question for a lot of electric vehicles, and that's service. How do you, are they going to make this a sealed off box like Tesla does? Because if that, that's going to be a huge turnoff to farmers. Farmers like to work on their own stuff. Farmers can't just get techs out and work on their stuff when it breaks. So are they going to make? Excuse me. They're really making. They're working on making everything else hot swappable like batteries. Are they going to make it where you can work on this?
Yeah.
And so if so, that's great. If not, that's potentially an issue, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good the product is, because all products break. Everything breaks. It does not matter how bulletproof it is. It will break. And so I think it's going to be a big deal for the farmers to be able to work on it. That would be my biggest concern.
Interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, farmers are very dead set in their I fix my own kind of stuff. Don't touch my equipment. They don't. Farmers don't like relying on other people. They're very self-sufficient, and like you said, they don't want to have to wait on a technician to come out and work on that. So yeah, I would definitely have to agree with you. That would be a major concern if they did not make it user friendly enough that a farmer could do their own operation on it. But if they do that, then that'll be huge.
Yeah. Now, granted, you probably know this better than me, but I didn't realize, but it seems like newer tractors like John Deere and that kind of stuff are more and more sealing farmers out. Isn't that right? I mean, I've heard stories about that in different technology circles and right to repair, and which maybe part of the reason why things are getting expensive, and also why farmers don't like to buy new tractors, because I'm like, I want to be able to work on my stuff. But is that right? Because that I'm thinking of a video that I seen a while back, so it may be off base. So if it is wrong, please correct me.
No, that's actually 100% accurate. I mean, a lot of newer tractors, especially the ones that have like GPS and other like computerized, apps along their features, are becoming more and more closed off to farmers. A lot of, because most farmers will rent out their tractors, they don't always own them themselves, and so oftentimes the company that is renting out the tractor is very specific about, hey, don't touch anything in there, let me mess with it, and farmers don't like that. I mean, John Deere is one that has definitely had a lot of issues in the past. I think there's even been some lawsuits with, I vaguely remember a story, and I actually think I heard this from another guest. Maybe you told me this or somebody. I remember a story of this guy who had a John Deere tractor, and he had it break down. I think like the teeth of one of his attachments broke, and so he called them to have it repaired, and they like wouldn't return his call for like hours, and like it got to be like a day later, and he like didn't hear back from him, so he just switched it out himself. And when he returned it to them, they were like, hey, why'd you switch it out? And he was like, because you weren't answering. And they actually sued him for it, and so he fought them and won because they weren't offering their services to him.
Wow. No, I was not the one who told you about that, but that's crazy town, and good for him. He deserved to win.
Yeah. No, exactly. So, I mean, I definitely don't blame farmers for wanting older vehicles because, again, like you said, they're a lot more, easy to operate for older generational farmers. But it's definitely an issue that's facing, agriculture right now, as people are being really, really picky with who they let touch their tractors.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, no kidding. So one of the other things I want to touch on was obviously there was a lot of information that we passed around today. Is there anything specifically that you learned about, through this whole video and through this whole conversation that you'd like to really highlight?
I probably have seen the statistic before, but I was surprised and shocked at how much water the ag community uses. 85%. That's huge. Mm-hmm. And so the whole agrivoltaic thing of being able to use solar panels and reduce water usage, I thought that was really interesting. So there was a lot of stuff that I learned about, but that stood out to me, and I think that is something I'm going to stick with me. That's going to stick with me for a long time to come, because I thought that was really interesting, a very surprising statistic. So yeah, I thought that was probably the most interesting thing. What about you?
Interesting. I mean, a lot of it was pretty new for me. I'm very tangentially aware of a lot of the technology that's going on in the ag realm. I kind of don't really know a lot of the like specifics, and so I was able to learn quite a bit about like agrivoltaics. That was kind of one of the big ones for me. The water usage was one that I was like again aware of, but I wasn't quite aware of how deep it went. Just a lot of the. A lot of the more techie based stuff was new for me, but as far as like the issues that the industry is facing and a lot of the advantages using this tech, I was pretty much aware of.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. And then I think my final question, do you see, tech like this and even like, the videos like we watched about it, opening up basically opening the door for conversation and interest between, like rural and urban communities, kind of like, on your podcast about tech, do you see like, conversations like this opening up more people to have an interest in agriculture?
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, I think a bigger question might be, though, even still, if I may pivot you a little bit, yes, I could see something like this because this is just very interesting stuff. I could see technology like this making farming more accessible to more people, which I think would almost be more interesting, because if somebody like myself could buy a tractor that can do the heavy lifting of knowing how to take care of my crops, then I can focus more on business and on maybe other aspects of farming that might be better suited to me versus the particulars of how best to water and how best to weed and how best to do these smaller things. Maybe I can focus more on business and the areas that would be better suited to my mind. And so I could see it opening up farming to different people that may have previously written it off and said, nah, farming's not for me. So I think that, yes, it could open up the conversation, but maybe in a different way, as opposed to making people more aware, maybe make it an open career field for more people, maybe.
Interesting. I like that idea. I hope that you're right about that.
Me too, because I like food.
As do I. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up all my questions. I don't know, did you have any other thoughts or anything else that you wanted to talk about in that conversation?
I don't think so. I really enjoyed the video, and I've enjoyed this conversation as well. This kind of stuff gets me pumped, and so I really enjoyed learning new things and stuff outside of my normal sphere of iPhones and computers and things like that. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah, and on your next episode of your tech podcast, you could be like, yeah, iPhones are great, but have you guys heard of agrivoltaics? And just completely throw everyone off.
Dude, I kind of want to just casually throw that out there and just see my co-host reaction and be like, this wasn't in the show notes, bro.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So trust me, man, we're going to riff. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. I can't wait for it. But no, I think that was a very good, productive conversation. Got some good ideas flowing and stuff like that. Some interesting thoughts on the future of ag and tech and ag tech.
Indeed.
Awesome. So I think that kind of wraps everything up for me. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to share them. If not, go ahead and remind everyone who you are, where they can find you, and anything else you want to plug.
Hi. Yes, you may follow me on Twitter, GameGuy2006. My name is Patrick, and you can also listen to my melodious voice talking primarily right now on Ubiquitous methods, talking about tech. You can also hear an archive of thoughts at Silly Mundane Things. Both of those places are anywhere you get your podcast. If for some reason it's not anywhere you get your podcast, let me know, and I hunt them down and I will put it there. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll be sure to put all that down in the description so people can find you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Like I've always said, you're always welcome to come back because you are one of my best guests. It's the reason you're part of the All-Star season. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun as always. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this very interesting conversation about a topic that I think we both did not realize how deep it could get.
Seriously.
But yeah, I think that kind of covers everything. So thanks again, Patrick, for joining me. It was definitely a lot of fun. I'll link all your stuff down in the description, and if you have anything else you want linked down there, just let me know. I'll put it down there for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So thanks again, Patrick, for helping me with this episode. Thanks to all of you for tuning in and for listening to our crazy banter for the last hour or so. But yeah, that wraps everything up for us. So I can't express how much I appreciate all of this, and hope to catch you all next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.